All right, guys. Now, if you're doing this one here in class, that means that something's come up where I can't be with you there for today, okay? So I know you'll do what you're supposed to be doing and go ahead and just take your notes in class. Now, this is a very important topic. It's properties of quadrilaterals. It's actually MAFS 5G24, and basically you're classifying two-dimensional figures with a hierarchy based on properties. So in other words, we're going to look at the properties of each one of these quadrilaterals, and we'll be able to tell which one it is by that. So first off, what is a quadrilateral? Now, the word quad means four, and lateral means sides. So quad being four, lateral being sides, it's four sides. So a quadrilateral is a two-dimensional figure, which means it has length and height. And it's a two-dimensional figure with four sides and four angles. Now here are all the quadrilaterals we're going to be dealing with. We have a square, a rectangle, trapezoid, rhombus, a parallelogram, and a kite. Kite and irregular are the different type of quadrilaterals. They don't fall in the other classifications, but they are still quadrilaterals, so you have to be aware of them. We'll be talking about them specifically. Let's start off with a parallelogram. Now, a parallelogram is a quadrilateral, which means it's four sides, and it has two sets of parallel sides. Now, when I say two sets of parallel sides, what we're talking about, let me get my pen here. Why is my pen not working? There we go. So this side right here, and it's usually signified by one slash, is parallel and the same size as that one. And the opposite side here, and I'm going to do with two slashes, is parallel and equal with this one. So as you can see, this parallelogram has two sets of parallel sides. So any figure, any quadrilateral that has two sets of parallel sides could be classified as a parallelogram. Now let's look at the another specific figure called a rectangle. Now a rectangle is a quadrilateral with four right angles. And right angles are usually signified by having a little box in the corner like this. And that tells you they're right angles. And a right angle, remember, means it's 90 degrees. So it had four right angles, and its opposite sides are equal and parallel. Once again, that means that this side and this side is equal, and this side and this side are equal and parallel. So if you remember when we talked about a parallelogram, it said opposite sides were equal and parallel. Well, that means a rectangle could also be classified as a parallelogram. But a parallelogram, not all parallelograms are rectangles, because remember, a parallelogram did not say that it had to have four right angles. So a rectangle has to have four right angles. All right, now let's take a look at a square. And let's listen to the properties about it. First one, it says square is a quadrilateral, means four-sided, with four equal sides and four right angles. So once again, we're going to have four right angles. But this time, this is a special one because all four sides are equal to each other, equal in size. So this square meets the requirements of a rectangle, because remember, a rectangle said it had opposite sides were equal and had four right angles. Well, a square can fall into that category. So a square can be a rectangle. Now, can a square also be called a parallelogram? Well, if you remember the properties of parallelogram, the only thing it said is you had to have opposite sides were equal. Well, in that case, a square could also be a parallelogram. But the best classification for it would be a square. All right, is a rectangle a square? Now remember, a square is a quadrilateral with four right angles with all sides equal. And a rectangle is a quadrilateral with four right angles and the opposite sides are equal. So think about it for a second. Is a rectangle a square? And the answer would be no, it is not a square. Because you remember, if you come over to the square, it says that all sides equal. So a rectangle is not a square. Not a square. Now, is a square a rectangle? Well, if we look down here, it says a rectangle is a quadrilateral with 4 right angles. Well, let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have 4 right angles and opposite sides are equal. This side is equal to this side, and this side is equal to that side. So a square meets the requirements or properties of a rectangle, so a square can be called a rectangle. So this here would be yes. Now, this is just a recap of what we just talked about. A square can also be called a rectangle because it has four right angles and its opposite sides are equal and parallel. But a rectangle is not a square because it does not have equal sides. All right, next thing is a rhombus. Now, a rhombus is a quadrilateral that has 4 equal sides. So just like a square, this side is equal to this side, equal to this side, equal to this side. So they're all the same size. Okay. So that's the only requirement for a rhombus. All 4 sides have to be equal. Now, since all 4 sides are equal, they will also be parallel with each other. Now, is a rhombus a square? Well, if you remember, a square has 4 right angles. This is not a right angle here. None of these are right angles. Okay, so a rhombus is not a square. So that'd be no, doesn't meet the requirements of a square. Now, is a square a rhombus? Well, let's see. It says here a rhombus is a quadrilateral with 4 equal sides. Well, a square has 4 equal sides, so a square can be a rhombus. Now, once again, the best classification for a square would be a square, but it could also be classified as a rhombus. This is just going back over it again, saying a rhombus is not a square because it does not have 4 right angles. Now we come to trapezoids. And I'm covering up the screen a little bit here, but it says a trapezoid is a quadrilateral that has at least one set of parallel sides. And what that means is this side right here is parallel to this side. So if I'm a quadrilateral and I have at least one set of parallel sides, then I can be classified as a trapezoid. Now that opens up a lot. There's 2 different definitions of trapezoids. There's inclusive and there's an exclusive. Okay, so you have an inclusive and you have an exclusive. And these are definitions. If you go on the internet, you'll find all kinds of controversy on what is a trapezoid. Well, what they're talking about is inclusive. We're saying that it has at least one set of parallel sides. When you're saying exclusive, you're saying that it has only one set of parallel sides. Now, in Duval County, with our curriculum, we're going with the inclusive definition. Okay, so basically what that means is that if we have one set, at least one set of parallel sides, then it could be classified as a trapezoid. Now, what kind of implications does that have? That means a parallelogram. It has 2 sets, but it at least has one set, so a parallelogram would be classified as a trapezoid. And we have a square, has 2 sets, so it has at least one. So in inclusive definition, a square could be classified as a trapezoid, and so could a rectangle, and so could a rhombus. So in the inclusive parallelograms, rectangles, squares, and rhombuses all meet the classification of a trapezoid. Now, in the exclusive, this one here would be one of the only two figures that would be classified as a trapezoid. This one here is actually known as an isosceles trapezoid. And what that means is that if I put a mirror here, I would have the exact same thing on both sides. So it has symmetry, okay? But only one line of symmetry, and that'd be right in the center. Now let's take a look at a different trapezoid. Notice on this trapezoid, we still have one set of parallel sides. Since it has one set of parallel sides, this is also a trapezoid, okay? So those are the two. If you did exclusive, those would be the only two figures that would be classified as a trapezoid. But since we're using the inclusive, you also would include squares, rectangles, parallelograms, and rhombuses. Okay, so let's take a look at these, and let's see if we can clear all this up. It says, is it a parallelogram? Well, let's see. A parallelogram is a quadrilateral that has opposite sides that are equal and parallel. By looking at this, I have this one and this one that are equal and parallel, and I have this one and this one that is equal and parallel. And I know that because it's telling me it's a rectangle. So that means it has 90-degree angles right here. So I know it has to be parallel. Now, the right angles have nothing to do with it, though, because for a parallelogram, it just says opposite angles, opposite sides that are equal and parallel. So it is a parallelogram. Now let's take a look at this trapezoid. Is it a parallelogram? Think about it for a second. Now, a parallelogram is a quadrilateral that has opposite sides that are equal. So this side and this side, they are not equal. They may be parallel, but they're not equal. So this trapezoid is not a parallelogram. And these two sides here, while they are equal, they are not parallel, which means if I extended them up, they would at some point run into each other. All right, let's look at this one. Now, this one's a rhombus. And remember, for rhombus, all sides have to be equal. So this one is equal to this one, which is equal to this one, which is equal to that one. So all four of them are equal. And when all four sizes are equal, that means opposite angles are going to be equal. Okay? And if opposite angles are equal, that means that these various sides, let's say this one and this one are parallel, and this one and this one are parallel. So remember, for a parallelogram, it just has opposite sides are equal and parallel. Well, the opposite sides are equal in shape, in size, and they are also parallel. So it is a parallelogram. Now a square. Once again, going back up to the properties of parallelogram, it says opposite sides are equal, and we know that these opposite sides are equal because all sides are equal. And since that's the only property for a parallelogram, a square is a parallelogram. All right, so let's look at this little flow diagram I put together here, okay? Now, the general flow, we start off, I'm going to get my highlighter here, and I'm going to use green maybe. That's good. Actually, yeah. So we're starting off here at quadrilaterals, okay? And quadrilaterals means it has to be a polygon, okay, which means it has to be a closed figure, okay, with 3 or more sides. It cannot have curved edges. And after that, we're going to come down to the first thing is a parallelogram. So a parallelogram has to have opposite sides are equal. And after that, we come down to a rectangle, which opposite sides are equal. But then we also have 4 right angles. The square on the bottom has opposite sides are equal and 4 right angles, but all sides are equal. So if we go up this flow chart, a square can be a rectangle, but a rectangle cannot be a square. So if you notice, it cannot come back down the arrow, but it can only go up. So a square can be a rectangle. A rectangle can be a parallelogram. All parallelograms are quadrilaterals. Okay. Now, if we go from square, I can come over to rhombus, because a square has 4 equal sides, and that's all that's required of a rhombus, have 4 equal sides. So a square can be a rhombus. Now, a rhombus, in order to be a square, would have to have 90-degree angles, and all rhombuses do not have 90-degree angles. That's why a square can be a rhombus, but all rhombuses are not squares. Now, as you can see, a rhombus comes right back to the parallelogram again, because it has all opposite sides are equal. So that flow there from parallelogram, rectangle, square, rhombus back to parallelogram. Now let's talk about a couple others. Here's our trapezoid. Remember, trapezoids only have one pair of sides. So in all actuality, I forgot something here. So I'm going to put it in. Each one of these parallelogram, rectangles, squares, and rhombuses all can be trapezoids, because we're using the inclusive definition, and all of those have at least one set of parallel sides. So all of those can be classified as trapezoids. And then, of course, trapezoids are quadrilaterals, the reason the arrow goes up, but not all quadrilaterals are trapezoids. Now next, let's talk about a kite. And if you can see this up here, the neat thing about a kite is that this side here is equal to this side, and this side here is equal in length to this side. So they're what they call adjacent sides are equal. So the 2 on top are equal in length, and 2 on bottom are equal in length. None of them are parallel. Okay, so they all intersect. So there's no way it can be parallel. That's why it's all by itself. It is a quadrilateral, but it is not in the parallelogram or trapezoid category. It's all by itself over here. Now the last group, irregular. Irregular, just like it says, it has no equal or parallel sides. Because if you look at this one here, none of these, I'm going to highlight it so you can see it. I'm looking at this one right here. If you notice, none of the sides are equal, and none of them are definitely parallel. So, but it is a four-sided quadrilateral. And the same with this thing that looks kind of like an airplane. Okay, that's an irregular. You will see these type. So any quadrilateral that has 4 sides, but no sides are equal and no sides are parallel, are known as irregular quadrilaterals. All right, so let's name these quadrilaterals. Let's start with this one. What is the best name for it? I'll give you a second. And what are the properties? Think about the properties. Just don't come up with a name. When I say properties, we're talking about the sides and angles. Okay, so the properties for this are opposite sides are equal length, and we can see that because this side is equal to this side, and this side here is equal to this side. Opposite sides are parallel. In other words, let me get a different color going here. This side here is parallel to this side here, and this side here is parallel to the opposite side. And that is obviously a parallelogram, because basically opposite sides being equal and opposite sides are parallel, it's a parallelogram. All right, let's try the next one. What are the properties? First off, how many How many parallel sides do you have? Oh, only got one set of parallel sides. Okay, so we can see that this side right here is parallel to this side. Now, since it only has one set of parallel sides, it's automatically only one type of quadrilateral. That has to be trapezoid. Okay, now I know a lot of you are already shouting out what the name is at home. Okay, but let's think about the properties. Okay, let me get my pen back here. So we can see here that this side is parallel to this one is parallel to this one, and all four sides are equal. And they appear to have 90-degree angles. So, has four equal sides, four right angles, it is a square. Now on this one, we can see that this one and this one are same size and parallel. These two are the same size and parallel, and we appear to have right angles. Now, until we have right angles, we would just class best name would be parallelogram. But now we have four right angles in there, that makes it a rectangle. All right. Now, looking at this, we can see that it appears that all four sides are equal in length, and they are parallel. Now, it kind of looks like a square, but it looks like a little squashed square because these angles don't really look like 90. So in that case, that means the best name for it would be a rhombus. All right. So classifying of quadrilaterals. That is the major standard we have for this. We're not solving for volume of it. We're not solving for the area. All we're doing is classifying by the properties. If you just try to memorize how they look, you're going to make mistakes. Remember the tree that I drew for you, and I went through and talked about the sides. The sides are the key. How many parallel sides? In a quadrilateral, you got four sides. If opposite sides are parallel and equal, that means it's a parallelogram. If they're opposite and equal and they have right angles, that means it's a rectangle. If they're all four sides are equal and has right angles, it's a square. If it's all sides are equal and it's parallel, but the angles are not 90, that makes it a rhombus. If it only has one set of parallel sides, it's a trapezoid. If it has adjacent sides that are equal in length, like the top and the bottom, that makes it the kite. And our last one is if we have four sides, no sides are parallel, no sides are equal, is irregular. That is the whole lesson and whole standard you need to have for quadrilaterals. All right, well, hopefully I'll see you in class tomorrow, and hopefully you've been good. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.